Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of the Baby Metal podcast. It, as it turns out, was January 20th, 2019 when we recorded this for most of us. The podcast is normally a place where we gather on something like alternate weeks to discuss news and thoughts on the past and future projects of Baby Metal. This particular episode is a continuation of the previous one, where we are talking about the contents of the graphic novel Apocrypha, The Legend of BABYMETAL. So if you are still waiting to read this and do not want to hear spoilers about the contents, move on to the next episode and come back and listen to this later, because that is all we're talking about here. So we're picking this up in progress. We talked for so long that this actually took 2 episodes worth of time, and so we have made it through part of the graphic novel already, and so we are going to continue here. So this was the regular podcast team. I am Paul. I was joined by Kevin, Garrett, and Vars, and we now rejoin the discussion already in progress. Okay, Chapter 3. 1793, Reign of Terror, Enemies of Liberty, Follow the Smoke, The First Battle, A Tomb for the Fallen.
So I did some researching some history for this. 1793 was really busy in Europe. French Revolution, France invading things, lots of people dying, lots of enemies of liberty in the U.S., Washington. Now I'm blanking on my U.S. history. He conducted the first cabinet meeting or something along those lines.
Oh, should it be somewhere in the Hamilton musical?
Quite possibly. The world was busy in 1793. Most of the references were from France.
Yeah, it does seem like this is largely, the reality of a kind of a campaign of terror from the government, and yes. Basically just trying to keep control.
Right.
So, like the beginning of chapter 3, it opens with them finding a girl named Clement.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything in the AMA about her? Because I believe she's only mentioned just in this chapter, and it's not a huge influence on it.
There was, actually.
Oh, right. Okay.
Did I miss something?
Chapter 3, The Little Girl Clement and the Design of the Vulture God is an homage to both GMB and our mutual love of Alien and Aliens. Clement is based off Newt, and the Vulture God design is our tip of the hat to Geiger's Alien design.
Oh
Nice.
my god.
Nice.
I love Alien.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think we only see Clement for 3 pages, and that's it. But
Yeah.
Yes. Something like that.
Just felt like a weird opening to this chapter of the 3 new girls in this generation rescuing a solo girl and never spoken of again.
Mm-hmm. Well, and ultimately, it's not even all that clear that they really. I mean, I guess they said we're here to help, but it seems like the help that they're offering is to go find the bad guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
It does seem pretty dismal, though. It doesn't seem like there's a sense in which some of this stuff doesn't fit in all that well with the sort of cheery teenage stuff that the band represents. But yeah.
Yeah, this chapter got pretty dark.
Well, both chapters are really kind of dark, or all the remaining ones. And after doing some research on history, this chapter feels European to me. Just from some of the backgrounds in the city, the guillotine, those are all themes from world history and the French Revolution, and goings on in Europe at that time. Beheadings were still a thing, public beheadings. So that was the setting I had in my mind when reading through this chapter.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was sort of. I wonder, does it actually? Yeah, I guess it does say this. I remember as I was reading this, I took a note. So Clement says, "Follow the smoke. Fire does not care if you're bad or good." And immediately the next thing is, Leala took offense to this, and I'm like, what? What's wrong with that? And oh, she must be the fire one. And then of course the very next box says a fire starter. She is. And so I was like, all right. I realized something, and unfortunately, then it just turned around and told me. So. But yeah, I mean, part of the game of this is to try to figure out which one corresponds to who. So Leala is the one that corresponds to Miko, which is the fire person.
Right.
And then Elsia or Elisa is the one with the
Mhm.
voice, but I don't believe it says anything about Odile, and so we're just left to assume that that's the ice.
Yeah, I think right that there wasn't much discussion of that.
Because it wouldn't be Clement, because it mentions Alicia by name, being saying that she keeps an oath of silence because her voice could move worlds.
Right. Yeah, so it's clear that Odile is related, as one of our three, and but doesn't actually get to do anything in this chapter. So because we're basically done with that, they're going to go head off and try to see what's going on here.
The next page is pretty interesting with the monster with the big nose.
Mm-hmm.
I never really understood what that was. They talk about
looks like a vulture.
Claiming to be
I sort of assumed it was the vulture god
of man evil.
Or it kind of reminds me of, like, I don't know what to call them, but there's these types of masks that you see beforehand, and it looks like a sort of rendition of that.
Like maybe the monster the masks are based on.
Are you talking about the panel with the five guys wearing
doctors.
the long beak mask things?
Yeah, the plague doctors that Metal Incarnate.
Yeah, the plague doctors.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, so that ties in again to why I think this was European, because that's a French thing.
Does it not actually say it was in France? It must have been in France though, because it's all about French history.
It's all French.
Yeah.
I don't. Did it actually say? I know the date is 1793. I don't remember actually seeing anywhere referencing that. Yes, this is.
I'm pretty sure it said France somewhere.
Did it?
Yeah.
Find it. I don't believe you.
Okay. Flip. Yeah.
Flippy.
I don't know where it would be if it's.
I'm pretty. I swear I saw it on one of the pages.
I don't know where it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's full of references to France. I mean, so when we meet this, well, okay, so some sort of presumably priest gets thrown out of a window, and then this guy in the mask confronts him, and the priest says, it was you that was like responsible for the plague of Marseille. Justinian and the whatever monster guy says, yeah, Cyprian Antoine also, it doesn't matter. Tell me where the thing is.
Right.
At the bottom of the page, at the right-hand page, it shows a man, and it's saying, "We, the protectors of all that is holy, shepherds of the planet, servants of God, you think a devil can simply ask what we hold dear?" Is that? I think I understand that since it's in white text, it's the man speaking, not black text, black background. It's not the man. I wonder if, I don't think it's explained that this monster is trying to get a hold of a piece of the Agimat, or no? Or Agimat?
Yeah.
Agimat. Yeah. Then soon afterwards, they start, the three main characters of this chapter come to fight him.
Yeah. No, I mean, it seems like this priest guy is kind of like responsible for keeping this safe. And so he's like, well, you can't just get it by asking. I know I'm going somewhere good and you're not. So, and then after that, we get to this battle that they're sort of like barely participating in, because they're just kind of thinking like, yeah, I feel like I've done this before. I found this confusing, actually, in a sense that there was, so on this page that I'm looking at, I don't know, I guess it's the page after the one we were just talking about, where there's like some sort of like fire from the left that goes grah. So there's, they've attacked the monster. They're showing up with their things, and then cut to the priest's dead. We don't like people dying. We would like no more people to die. And then the fight's back on. So I don't understand where that calm came from. Like, did they knock the monster away somewhere? I guess in the lower right panel, that is kind of, the monster's kind of sitting there, smoking.
I don't think they knocked the monster away or somewhere. I think they just want to finish the fight as to not cause more death and destruction.
Yeah. And then the next panel, the next page is kind of interesting because it kind of they're kind of going through this fight, but also kind of thinking like, this doesn't seem right. Like, we're being pretty violent too. Are we the baddies? It's very hard to stop talking. I suddenly realizing I haven't given you much chance to talk, Vars. Have you been building up things you've been meaning to say?
Well, I think at first I thought it was the Plague Doctor, but obviously it shows itself more, and it seems to be a rendition of the Vulture God. So it seems that that these metal spirits are going through time fighting this Vulture God that keeps reappearing and trying to find whatever it wants to find.
Mm-hmm. So it does seem like the Vulture God itself is also kind of changing form a little bit from era to era.
Oh, it's absolutely changing form from era to era. I think it's period specific, and we can kind of talk about that more as we get to the end here.
Well, right. Yeah, once we get to the end, it definitely evolves into something different and a lot newer.
I mean, everything evolves, right? Each chapter's, well, heck, the first, between 3 and 4, it's like 100 years, and then another 120 years or something like that. So it's about a century between each battle. I don't know if there's meaning there.
Hopefully it's not like how long we have to wait for the next album.
In fact, I think there might be a correlation between like how long these beings live, these heroes live. Like as soon as they die, the next set's born, or the next set who's going to turn into them is born.
So is the baby metal we're seeing on stage, well, I mean, before this whole Chosen Seven lore, do you think they are part of this, of these metal spirits?
Absolutely. I think it says so on the very last page of the book.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's something to think about.
Okay, well, let's plug along here.
Yeah. So the like on the next page, there's this, the sort of like Vulture God lying on the ground saying bad, and I'm not sure what's going on behind him, but it sort of seems like there are people Zombies? Who are dying behind him, crawling around. Because it seems to me like what has happened on this page is that the Vulture God has kind of like taken the power from the death around him to kind of recover. Does that seem like what happened?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, because he does seem to kind of revive. And then, okay, so then there's like something like an earthquake, which seemed to have come out of nowhere. And I did actually do a little bit of research to try to figure out, was there an earthquake in 1793? But I couldn't find one. I don't know if anyone else found anything like that, but
I didn't find anything like that, no.
Yeah. But anyway, so eventually we get down to finding the next bit of the Agimat kind of buried in the statue. Maybe that's the first bit. Have we found one before? Maybe that's the first.
No,
bit.
This is the first fragment.
Yeah.
And it shows towards the very last page of the chapter that the presumed Vulture God is very upset that happened, and as soon as they touch it, it seems like everything just ends.
Yeah.
I think that's a recurring theme of as soon as they get their hands on the piece, everything's just over.
Yeah, it's true. It's sort of interesting. But yeah, all right. So
chapter 4.
Elisa basically just shouted the thing to death, or shouted the thing into submission.
The power of Sue.
The one who vowed silence. That was her first time speaking again or singing again or whatever.
Yeah,
was enough to take him down.
So actually, okay, so the fire worked the first time, and the voice worked the second time, but I think the voice keeps working. Oh well, anyway, we'll get to it. So chapter 4, we are now in 1862 in Canada. So Victoria, British Columbia, 1862. And this actually does seem like this really does tie the things in history, at least a bit. So I don't know if you did any research on that.
I absolutely did. So,
right.
British Columbia aside, it was a really busy year in America. Middle of the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln did a bunch of stuff in America, but British Columbia specifically, the British were sending people to British Columbia to colonize, bring order to the region. start mining, things of that nature. And there was actually a notable. Let me find my notes. There was a notable instance where I believe the shipwreck is referring to. And while I find that, somebody take the mantle for me, while I figure out where I put that note.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that sort of featured here early in the chapter is a reference to what must be smallpox. So, smallpox was something that did kind of hit the, particularly the native people in this area, and brought from San Francisco, I think. So, so that's also kind of relevant. And another thing too, in the AMA, there was a little bit of a discussion of this chapter, which said that initially it was. So it's actually sort of, there's not a lot of text here, and originally it was actually going to be silent. It was going to be just imagery, which would have been very hard. Eventually, they decided that it would be better to have at least some text in here, but there really is kind of like a fairly sparse narration.
One question I do have that one of you might have caught on to that I didn't was like, what's going on with the owl and the what appears to be an eagle in this chapter, a few pages in?
Well,
seems to be a main plot point throughout the chapter.
Well, I think that's
really
them.
Understood.
I think that's our. I think those are our protagonists. I think in this chapter they are birds.
You know what? I love that as a bird guy. I love it. I have one.
This is the chapter that I found nearly impossible to chart. Like who corresponds to who, because
I struggled with this a lot.
Nobody's using fire and ice and voice, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, there was a point where I was just really confused.
It looks like the eagle's shooting lightning of some kind. Could that be assumed that it's fire, or it's coming out of its mouth? So it could be its voice too. I don't know.
Yeah,
but you can go ahead and move on, but not a huge deal. Just assume that those three birds are the protagonists.
Yeah, so there was definitely somebody had. Oh well, I guess this was also in Plastic Metal's Reddit post, that the presumption that it was an eagle, a crow, and an owl that were our people, and maybe this has some relevance to something, but yeah, this one is interesting in that it does seem like it's not. It doesn't really feel like there are special powers being used. It does seem like the storyline is that the Vulture God has kind of recruited or enslaved a bunch of people to dig for something lost, and the birds come in and kind of stop that.
Put an end to it altogether, the whole operation.
But yeah, it's a sort of an unusual chapter. So there's some sort of explosion that it's okay. Yeah, I have a hard time figuring this out. The one thing that seems to be using fire at all in this is this weird like mummy looking creature.
Monster. Yeah, it's holding torches.
So there was a time, I'm not sure that I'm past that time, when I was wondering if it was possible that was the the fire person, and that what happens there is like a bunch of gunpowder gets exploded or something. But anyway,
it looks like that could be gunpowder. Like in the chest there, it looks like there could be dynamite in that.
But okay, so in the aftermath of the explosion, many things all fall down, and I thought it was actually kind of it's kind of cool. So the non-owl, I guess this must be, maybe this is a crow, seems to get like smashed by a rock. So gets sort of stuck against the ground under a rock, and the owl comes and sort of like removes the rock and kind of nuzzles with it a second, and then they go get the little. Well, then it looks like someone seeks out the little Agimat piece, but then now we're at that question where we weren't sure who got it, because it does sort of seem like the claw that's gripping for it.
Now looking back, I think now that the chapter ends directly after this, I feel that it was one of the protagonists that got the piece of the Agimat. if they're going to stay with the same theme of as soon as they get their hands on it, the scene ends and it's over.
Yeah. Unless all it takes is just for someone to get it.
Oh, yeah. Or that, yeah.
Well, I can't find again where I saw information about this shipwreck, but I can point out something from the AMA that was interesting with this chapter. There's a bunch of kids in cages in this chapter that is in fact a Easter egg. And quoting from the Z2 rep on the AMA, there are images of children in cages. This was meant to highlight the current crisis of child separations on the American border. It felt immediate, and we really wanted to convey the terror of such actions.
Interesting. So that was not actually historically derived, which is also sort of interesting. So maybe that means we should stop trying to find historical precedents for everything. But
maybe some things are random.
Well, it says that at the end, right? It says this is all just fabricated.
Yeah.
but
so we got,
but I'm going to do my due diligence. If they're going to give me the year and a location, I'm going to do the research. Why not?
They were almost consistent.
Yeah, I mean, in the last chapter, we got a lot of references to the French Revolution, so that was nail on the head, right? So there could be something we're just missing here in this time frame.
Right.
Well, yeah, this whole book is basically not a non-fiction and fiction just clashing together and leaking into our real world.
All right, let's see. We have gotten past a lot of the book, and we have one sort of major content chapter left, and then some philosophy chapters. So I think we're doing all right.
And I have a feeling you're going to enjoy chapter 5.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So chapter 5 brings us into something like a little bit closer to a recognizable era. And apparently in the AMA it was mentioned that the color theme in this was actually based on the sampled of a monochrome green screen monitor, which I can understand. But yeah,
they totally nailed that look.
Yeah. But so this is the early 70s, the beginning of the computer era when ARPANET was at its infancy, and so we open in Arlington, Virginia, and what's the guy's name now? Bernie Tomlin is found dead. So Newman left him for no less than 11 minutes. And I don't understand what that means, because that's a weird thing. There are many things that are more than 11 minutes. So was he gone for 7 hours? I don't know. No less than 11 minutes.
I believe it was mentioned somewhere he asked to go get a cup of hot chocolate. And what took 11... I didn't realize that took 11 minutes to make.
Yeah, I think it's just to emphasize that what happened quickly.
Okay, yeah.
That's how I interpreted that.
Yeah, no, I think that's what it's supposed to mean. But the word there should be more. No more than 11 minutes would convey that meaning. No less than 11 minutes is not very limiting.
But it's thematically fitting how they've written the rest of the book, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
So time of death was determined as 1643.25 on the dot. That's not a very Arlington, Virginia way to write the time. But it does allow you to observe, and this isn't my observation, I forget whose it was, but that all of those numbers do add up to 7. Which is a little ridiculous.
Oh.
I did not notice that.
Uh-oh.
10 foil time.
I didn't notice that, but later in the chapter, I did go and translate all the binary. So.
Yeah, I did too. Did you find anything?
I did.
Well,
all I got was random symbols.
That is not what I got. We can talk about that in a little bit.
Yes, please do.
It was addressed in the AMA actually too, but.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I think see if I'm right.
Okay. Okay, so there's this mysterious death of this programmer in this sealed room, essentially. The no one's come in and out. It hasn't been very long, and it says something like the only eyewitness is dead with no eyes. And so that was one question I had. When you look at that picture of this guy's head, are you interpreting that as actually missing its eyes? Or is the point just that it's a corpse?
His eyes do look different to everybody else's.
My first thought is this guy the Green Lantern. I don't know. I think it's just supposed to signify maybe possession or some other worldly thing is going on with him.
He's probably an android or something.
Soulless.
Maybe.
Because isn't that the goal of the Vulture God? To take souls and bring death? I could see him.
Well, the goal of the Vulture God is the apocalypse.
Yes.
The end of all life.
Yeah, it seems like, sort of taking over the thing that's in control of, like, the weapons defense systems might be a good way to do this.
Right. That's actually, I thought there was a really interesting theme to this chapter. We've seen the Vulture God, and we've seen beings in various forms of living creatures, but we get it here in a computer. And I thought that was a 90-degree right turn from what we'd seen before that I actually really appreciated and thought was neat.
Yeah, and I mean, we actually just came out of a similarly weird turn, which is, they were birds, so.
Right.
So the universe is somewhat unconstrained.
Right.
But okay, so so we have these, our protagonists are now, I guess, programmers in the department of the dead guy or something. I think
something like that.
Yeah. Who sort of feel like something's not right. Like this guy never made mistakes, but there's an error and the error is propagating. And so somebody said they were just about to come down and, consult with him about it when this happened. So we have who? We have Nicole, Cassandra, Tony, I think are the three people.
Yes.
I find it a little bit, I mean, like, there's nothing you can do about this, but the use of the names is a little bit jarring. Here, he like,
yes.
Couldn't they just like wear name tags or something? I don't know.
It's hard to keep track of who's who.
Yeah.
When they give us names.
Yeah, I mean, so it's all deductions. Like, all right, well, so you're talking to this person, so that means the name you used is not your own. So
right.
The background art is kind of interesting, though. It's all over the place in terms of era. So this is supposed to be, what is this, 1972?
72, yeah.
And the panel where it says a mistake, Tomlin's mistake, has this person sitting in front of a bunch of computers that were released in 1977, but that's all right.
Forgiven.
Little did they know that they would be getting
Commodore Pets,
yeah, that somebody like you would be going through their book, an expert in what do you call this? Early computing, retro technology,
vintage computing, retro computing,
vintage computing.
Yeah. But anyway, whatever, it's okay. It's all sort of like thematically 70s and 80s computers. But
so it's not an expert. It got the message across.
Right.
To me.
Actually, yeah, I was thinking that too. Metal Incarnate just said, also we think the government is years ahead. It's possible that this it's implying that technology, like the government already has technology that is far beyond what we have.
That's true. Yeah, the government had Commodore Pets years in advance of the public.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Area 51 conspiracies.
Yeah. But so our protagonists like stick around and try to figure out this mystery, and nobody notices because they're always working late anyway, because they have to put in overtime because they don't get paid as much. It's like oh well. Yeah. Not false, I'm sure.
But, yeah, not so subtle.
Yeah.
Easter egg there, maybe.
But yeah, it is kind of, it's kind of cool how they're kind of like doing this unnoticed. Let's see. So in the background of the, I guess on this page where it in the upper left corner it says we had to see this through. They do have a little map of the ARPANET at the time, with little nodes representing all the different places that things went. And I think they did mention here somewhere that there were basically at this time about 23 nodes on the internet. So
okay, do you want to 15 seconds explain to maybe our younger listeners what ARPANET was?
Oh, and I'm not sure even. I mean, ARPANET was military funded. I'm just kind of doing this off the top of my head now, but military funded kind of research project that connected mostly universities. There was a company called, well, its initials are BBN, and it's the one that made this interface message processor that's actually relatively faithfully reproduced here. So you can actually even see the BBN on it. But
awesome.
It yeah, and so it's basically just sort of a very early way for mostly universities to communicate with each other. But it was essentially funded by the military.
And this is the project that evolved into what is now the internet, correct?
Yeah.
Neat.
So, and in fact, actually, there was one other thing too that, like, so part of what was happening here was that, you know, at this moment, the you know, like all 23 nodes went down or something like that. And I don't think there was a crash of that sort at this time frame, but there was in 1980 a point where there was some sort of cascading problem that actually took out all of the existing ARPANET nodes at that point.
Vulture God got in.
Yeah. So
Based on a true story.
It's sort of, yeah.
It's well researched, right? I remember reading in the AMA that you know, a lot of the stuff in the background, like you mentioned, the ARPANET locations, a lot of the papers that have code and things like that are authentic to ARPANET code.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading in the AMA, so very well researched chapter in that regard.
Yeah, except for the dates on the personal computers that they show. So on the next page, we have a bunch of TRS-80 Model 4s, I think. Again, much after 1972, but the government is, you know, I guess we have concluded. Oh, and then there's what I think is a K-Pro 10. But yeah, so definitely conclusive evidence that the government had stuff way in advance of the public.
Maybe they'll bring you on for the follow-up as their technical advisor.
Right, hopefully. But yeah, so I guess we see here. Okay, so whatever the in the plot they're working through this and trying to figure out, like, you know, what's going on, and they kind of make this connection to the stone from which semiconductors are made. You know, as being kind of, I don't know, a way that you can connect the computers to nature. But
sure.
But so they succeed in, like, getting integration of the rogue code, and so they want to just, like, go ahead and see what's happening. And I think at this, you know, so they mentioned that there's a risk. Oh, that's interesting. I've got interesting background noise that I hope can get edited out, but we'll see. But so they risk some, you know, seeing the same fate as the guy who died, but they, you know, press on anyway because they have to. And this page, I think, is the first where we see this recurring binary. So, and the binary does keep recurring, and I think it's roughly the same throughout. But did you want to say anything about what you discovered?
Yeah, so the binary I kept putting together, when you broke it out, I found a word. I found death. 01001000, 01000101, 01000001, 01, and on, but basically I got the word death from going through all of the binary.
Right.
Death.
Yes.
And that has to be right? I mean, and in fact it is right, but...
Is it really?
But it had to be right.
I spent like an hour on that trying to figure that out.
I could not find anything at all.
Little Easter egg there.
Random symbols.
Well, yeah, so I should say I puzzled over it a little bit, and so part of what makes it somewhat tricky is the fact that there are randomly placed spaces in there. So
yes,
it makes it look like it's grouped in a way that's not consistent.
That's why it took me an hour.
Right, but in the AMA it actually does say, you know, that this is just sort of directly asked and answered. It's like, yeah, well, actually, just it says this, and if you go to the translator, it comes out as death.
Awesome. I got all kinds of numbers. I thought maybe they were years because some of them came out as numbers. Some in the 70s, some earlier. Some numbers that made no sense.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't until about 45 minutes into looking at this thing, I just put the whole thing together.
What's good? At least it's sort of satisfying, and the fact that you know that it's right. Now.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, let's see. So, there's also this like little recurring. I don't know what this is. It's like it's this weird sort of like squid robot shape that you see on the screen of the sort of portable computer, and it's showing up in various places. I assume this must be some sort of representation of the digital vulture god.
Yeah, that was my thought as well.
I agree.
But okay, so I guess they do whatever it is I don't know what it is that they do. They hit some sort of switch, and then there's like a Kirk and a Thum. It seems to me, like looking at how this is described, it doesn't look like this is what happened to that guy, the Tomlin guy, because that looks a lot more destructive.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then we wind up in like Tron land.
It's the perfect description for what's going on.
It's basically Tron.
Yeah, my first thought was like they've got like the Gundam crests on their head, maybe they're Power Rangers, that kind of thing. But Tron totally nails it.
Daft Punk.
So the thing, of course, that I find a little dismaying about this is that now they look different. So like we've kind of figured out who everybody is, and then suddenly they're all different now.
Yeah. Yeah, now I don't know who anybody is anymore. But they battle the Vulture God in cyberspace.
So I think
missed opportunity for a light cycle battle.
Right. I think I feel. Let's see. So there are basically three. The three are all in there. One of them has kind of like a disc behind her head. One of them has kind of a triangular visor, and then one has sort of like a moon-shaped visor.
Yes.
And I think so. The one with the disc behind her head is going to be the one. Is the Sue analog that has the voice.
Moon
beyond that,
the ice one being Yui. I'd imagine.
Which one?
Like the one with the half moon. And the pointing one, meaning could be assumed as fierce or fiery.
Yeah, could be. This could be. Yeah. So the one with the sort of like triangular visor fabricates a bow and arrow and some sort of archery set out of thin air, and then spacks the bad guy, and the moon one schlunks the bad guy. And I don't know which one is more like fire. But
who knows?
I'll leave that up to everybody's imagination. I'm not even going to touch that.
Yeah.
But like what I don't understand is that we actually never see the Agimat in this chapter, the third piece.
Oh yeah, we do.
Yes.
Kind of just assumed as it zooms out.
It's the source, right? So I found it, the source, and then just under that, what do we do? And there's the piece.
Yes.
Where am I missing this?
It's hard to see. It's kind of it's a bit glary.
I'm being serious. Oh, I see it. They found it, the source.
It's right above Berm.
Oh yeah, there it is. Found it.
Excellent.
My eyes just missed that panel completely.
Yeah.
So much to analyze on these pages.
I don't want to think about how much time I spent.
Yeah. But so apparently the secret in this battle is yelling adapt. That apparently is, I don't know why that's the thing, but adapting apparently solves the problem. Although it does seem like, I don't know.
Wasn't that a theme from earlier in the book? Adapting,
maybe
from the mythology in the prologue.
Could be,
or maybe the first chapter.
I don't recall, but I mean, that doesn't mean much. But yeah, I mean, so apparently, like, adapting winds up being the thing that allows the creation of the arrow, and then the use of the voice to yell the thing away. And so I don't really know exactly what to make of this, but it looks to me like we've been talking for a long time. It seems to me like the Vulture God got the last one at the end. Am I wrong about that?
I see that. I see it in his hands.
And I don't know what happened after that. Everything broke, and then suddenly we've got the shiny symbol.
Yeah, that part confused me.
I'm missing where the Vulture God got the last piece.
It's on the second to last page of chapter 5. It says at the very bottom left, "No, sisters, we dash," and then some binary, and then he has it in his hands.
Yeah, maybe what
he
happens
does. Yeah, look at that.
Like opening up a void or something, kind of like what we see in the Starlight video, or not the Starlight, but the Distortion video. Maybe
Is that
that's what
not
happened.
it shattering?
Yeah, and
in the last panel,
something is shattering, but it sort of seems like the entire reality is shattering.
Yeah, and it's opened up a void, black hole,
sent to the mirror universe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what's on the other side. Maybe what we see in Distortion or Starlight, those videos is, or what's on the other side might be the Chosen Seven or something like that.
Could be. No way to argue against it.
We have to wait for another book, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, I've always thought of this logo as an eclipse, but I'm wondering if it's not a black hole. Judging by the pieces breaking, are they getting sucked into nothingness because they disappear?
Could be. So this kind of symbol. Well, okay, so this symbol is not the same as the distortion symbol, precisely. And they did comment on that on Twitter or the AMA or somewhere. I mean, like they did sort of point out that it isn't the same. But variants of this.
So I am wrong.
What?
So I am wrong.
Oh well, no, I don't know. I mean, but they're definitely. I mean, like I know when this was, I don't know when this was like a year ago or something when it was sort of new. There was discussion of maybe we're seeing an eclipse. You know, maybe what we're looking at is like a view from the moon of the Earth blocking the sun, or whatever. I think that when maybe at the last year's New Year's tweet or something. But definitely this kind of shape has existed like throughout their time. You know, so if you look at the little movies that introduce things like Budokan or whatever, you know, you see these shapes there too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not that exact show, but I mean, I've definitely this is an image that Koba likes.
Yes. Just kind of a final thought I had on this chapter. Going back to the beginning when the Agimat is broken into 3 pieces and sent through time, I think it's interesting that the Fox God is able to digitize it and put it inside of a computer.
Yeah, that's pretty.
No, that's true.
Nice.
Well, you wouldn't think to look there.
Does that mean the Fox God is truly timeless? I suppose it exists in all reality at all times. Otherwise, how would it know, right?
Yeah. Don't know.
Something I was confused about before we get into the next chapter is like in the beginning of the book, didn't the Fox God task the main 3 to destroy the Agimat, but in the next they're putting it back together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that might be sort of what we're kind of supposed to be talking about in this next chapter. I don't know what's going on in this next chapter, but
it's a thing.
But yeah, I mean, it's true. They're not doing what they were supposed to do, but yet it seems like it turned out the way it was supposed to turn out.
Yeah, you are correct.
But yeah, so the next 2 chapters are very abstract. I don't know. Does anyone want to take a run at this? What happens in chapter 6, The Void?
I feel chapter 6 is the reunion after they've all, like, I think it happens like it wrapped itself back around to the very beginning, in the sense of it's all back to normal, and the Agimat is back in one piece, so the Fox God can return in human form if he so wished to, and that he can still exist and not his soul not being torn apart anymore. Like a final wrap up on the story. Happy ending.
What's interesting to me is that, you know, they anthropomorphize the Vulture God for the first time as what I'm assuming is a woman, right? And it's almost as if she's, I don't know, brought to the light, as it were.
That is
or
true.
saved or rescued in this chapter. Not so much defeated.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I suppose that is a defeat in a way, but not in that they destroyed the vulture god. Like, they saved its soul or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does seem so. First of all, it is true that if you look at what happened, like who we're looking at here is it's the person from the first chapter, right?
Right.
It's Saho again. And it does seem like, they're hanging out in space or something with the vulture god. The vulture god does seem to possess at least one piece of this thing. So maybe that's actually what made it necessary to do this, is that they didn't get all three pieces. But
maybe
it does also seem like the vulture god does transform. I mean, like it's staged. Like it's kind of going bit by bit until this is less a vulture and more human. And everything is solved by hugging. And now there are 4. What do we make of that? I don't know, but all right.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they come to this conclusion. It's a little too abstract for me. I would have liked maybe just a little bit more concrete, I don't know, narration or explanation as to what the heck is going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does say, there's an explanation right there. It says, together, ...
Well, sure. I mean, it's like Var said, weren't they, and Garrett said, weren't they supposed to be destroying this thing? Well, they put it back together with the help of the vulture god, which, I don't know, I guess transforms the vulture god back into a good person or good god or something. I have no idea. What we know of the vulture god to this point is that it's pure evil trying to destroy the world. So why was the end goal to put the thing back together and save its soul or whatever?
Didn't also say somewhere else in the beginning that the vulture god existed in the first place because of the Agimat? That the creation of the Agimat by the fox god disrupted the balance of good and evil.
I thought, well, no, I thought my interpretation was that the Agimat basically attenuated the power of the fox god to the point that the vulture god could get it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. That the vulture god was created, and it says as much, by the imbalance created by man doing things to the planet that they shouldn't be.
Right.
That is what released the vulture god.
Maybe not created it, but at least, allowed it to be freed.
Right, or at least create the imbalance that freed the vulture god or whatever.
Well, it does. I forget now where this was, but it does. I believe that the vulture god was conceived to have been imprisoned in some way.
It says, quote, with the power of the fox god trapped in the Agimat, the cosmic balance of energy was unbalanced and the vulture god was released.
Yeah.
So like maybe like the Agimat was like the final piece to making him freed for eternity to try and ruin the earth.
But then it kind of contradicts what's going on here at the end when they put the Agimat back together.
Yes, exactly.
And the vulture god is no longer maybe she still is the vulture god, but she's clearly no longer evil just based on the artwork.
Right. Well, maybe it's now some sort of fusion of the fox god and the vulture god, since both were sort of inside the Agimat.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know.
I hadn't thought of that.
I mean, I hadn't until like 1 second ago, but
that's certainly possible.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, they put the thing back together, and we zoom in on it, and it seems like what happens is once it's back together, a void opens in the symbol. So I believe that little crack is supposed to give us orientation that makes us aware that we're looking at that same, it's the same thing. And now it's opened up.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I see as well.
And then the story's over, and we get philosophy.
Yeah.
So this is Apocrypha, where it says, we try to ascribe meanings like so many things that are arbitrary. So, don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I don't get about the language in this at the beginning of this chapter. It's like, well, we just told you this neat story, but it doesn't matter. That was kind of my first impression when I read that.
Yeah. Many like to think it is of my doing, I too am a creation of the universe. So
yeah,
the art is nice.
The art's incredible. Once again, and then of course, an infinite legion, bound by compassion.
Yes, we've
we
been
are
praising
the
the Fox God.
But yeah, before we get there, just say I am the conscience of 3 or 7 or 10, right? And you have to look at that and say, oh, look, those are all numbers we know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't know what to make of that.
And 100 million is a prediction of how many albums are going to sell in 2019.
Hopefully.
Question mark.
Hopefully. But yeah, so there was somebody mentioned, I think this also was on the AMA, that Amazon said in their summary that like this is a story that goes from like whatever 1600s in Japan to modern day New York City. And they're like, well, how come it didn't go to modern day New York City? But
I think it did.
That panel is supposed to be in like the New York subway, I think.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Absolutely.
So
yeah.
So that was the extent of the
part of it.
But then we get we get our the only thing that's even close to a connection to the band we know, which is a stage with no people on it and a lot of people holding up little kitsune signs.
Anybody ever place that stage art? Is it based off something? Anybody look?
I wondered.
I'd like to imagine it was a download festival.
Yeah, it looks like a festival, definitely.
Like with the one where the karate live video was shot. I forget what year that was.
2016, maybe.
That sounds right.
Yeah, download 16. Right. Yeah, I'd be curious to ask.
That's my guess.
Greg, what, if anything, that panel's based off of? Just.
Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be surprising if there really is an actual photo that where quite possibly the people on the stage were removed, but
yeah,
it would have been nice if there was someone visible. But, oh well.
Well, that takes us to the end. We are the one.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
at least we know that name.
Praising a religion this whole time.
It's nice though. Is it so? There's that. Is the? I don't actually know what I'm looking at. I didn't notice the background there. Is that over the Earth, or is that just sort of like space clouds behind it?
The background of what?
The We Are the One panel.
It looks like Earth to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So this is a little thing floating somewhere in the atmosphere.
It's a planet.
Supposedly, yeah.
I can confidently say it's a planet. I don't know if it's our planet.
Okay. Pretty close to Earth. Oh, I see what you're saying. No, I understand, yeah. I don't know, can we find Japan? All right, so I think we now understand the book. Congratulations, everybody.
If you made it this far, thanks. You are now an expert on Apocrypha.
We overanalyzed everything.
Yeah.
As we should have.
So I don't think we probably don't really need to talk about like the process gallery. It's kind of cool. At the end, there's a bunch of little like art pieces, but
sketches and whatnot. Pretty cool.
It's definitely worth taking a look at the Reddit AMA. So because there are we've mentioned a couple of things that were in there. And yeah, there were some things like one of the questions people had was like, were there any concepts that weren't used? And there was one that they actually, I'm surprised they even said this, but they said we had so many unused literary concepts at the script stage, since we were free to choose any that they wanted. And one of my favorite unused examples, and I forget exactly who this was. This might have been, I don't think this was Greg speaking, but I don't know exactly who it was. One of my favorite unused concepts was a riff on one of my favorite authors, Jane Austen. It was to be set at a wedding in the countryside of Kent, England. The bride was acting funny. The warriors think the bride is an incarnation of the vulture god, but really it turns out she's just, whatever, wants to marry the noble colonel and not the wealthy stooge.
Oh, interesting.
It was super silly and cut for good reason, but I still love it. That's what it says. It would not have fit thematically in this book very well.
Yeah.
It would fit Cobra.
What do you think? Maybe give final thoughts from everybody and then wrap it up?
Sure.
Yep.
I love the book. It's definitely needs more than just one read. But I think the art is amazing. I think it does explain a lot more. Like when you really analyze it, you start to relate to the current Baby Metal, even songs from their first album and all the lore stuff that you see on stage. And yeah, I love my little Baby Metal Bible.
I guess I'll go next.
Sure.
Overall, I really enjoyed this comic. I spent a total of 3 days basically just every single second of my free time going over it. Unfortunately, I was away from my computer, so I couldn't get like all the information. Like I didn't read the AMA like I wanted to. In fact, I totally forgot about it up until the recording. But I'm definitely gonna go back and do it because like I feel that there's total potential for a sequel to this book, but going into the future Baby Metal and not actually the present day Baby Metal.
They definitely they left a framework open, you know.
Yeah, for sure. That's something I would definitely like to see. It only gets me hyped for the future of Baby Metal. I think 2019 and 2020 are going to be their year. I feel like they're going to go very far in the next coming years. I'm so glad to be a part of it.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as everybody else. You know, this is kind of my first real graphic novel that I've read through, so it's an interesting experience. You know, they always say you always remember your first, right? And I will definitely always remember this thing. The art is just unbelievable. If you're not a graphic novel reader, like I am not really, but you're into this band, I definitely recommend picking it up just for the art alone and to appreciate that, because it is incredibly well illustrated and unique. I remember reading through the AMA, and one of the things they wanted to do was, and one of the reasons they wanted to go with Greg and Z2 was to do something different and unique, because that fits what Baby Metal is and kind of their ethos. And they're totally right. I've never really seen anything quite like this art, and that I think really describes Baby Metal. So I think that's a great pairing. The story, you know, like Var said, like everybody said so far, you're gonna have to read it a couple of times. You know, if you've made it this far, you're probably still confused and still have some questions. I know I'm still confused and still have questions.
I almost feel like a new reader who knows nothing about Baby Metal could read this a couple times and get a firm understanding of what's going on within the comic, but still have nothing to do with the band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point. You know, if you're a new reader or don't know the band, you just pick this up off the shelf because you like the art or something. I would actually really be interested to find the opinion.
I'm going to beta test this.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the opinion of somebody who doesn't know the band, doesn't know the lore, doesn't know what any of this is about, and to kind of see what their impression or a review of it would be. I think that would actually be really interesting. You know, because we're looking at it. Happen. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at it from the perspective of super fans who overanalyze everything.
Yes.
And it would be cool to see a simpler view of it. You know, maybe we'll learn something that we hadn't thought of because we just overthought everything and we didn't need to.
And assumed certain things. And
yeah. So that would be really interesting. You know, stay tuned. Maybe we'll see if we can find a way to make that happen down the road. But yeah, final thoughts. It's really pretty. The story is interesting, although a little contrived and a little confusing at times. But I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're a fan of the band.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think that I know I am happier with it now than I was immediately after receiving it. Because when I first got it, I just went, read. It's already over. You know? And I actually really do appreciate it a lot more having gone through it slowly and sort of trying to think about things. So
I agree.
I do think...
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that, because I remember when I got it too, I sat on my sofa and just burned through it.
That was the same.
Yeah, and it took me
then
like
I felt the
10
pacing.
or 20 minutes.
Yeah. And then it really feels like the pacing is wrong. You know, that it's just like you didn't spend enough time getting invested before it's over and that kind of stuff. But I think you have to read these in a different way from that.
I would definitely like a longer format version of these in the future. That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I am impressed by the art. And I think they did succeed in giving us something that we hadn't done before. I mean, you're right, in the AMA it did say Like the main guidance is, if they've done it already, don't do that. Do something else.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, cool. Well, that was an intense journey through the graphic novel. But and I don't feel like we hit everything. I mean, like, I feel like we were kind of running out of time and sort of sped up at the end. But so I don't know that we will talk about it again. But there's more here than even we just covered. And we might talk about it again. Well, we might. We'll see. So I will say then that's it for this episode. You can join us on the Baby Metal Podcast Discord to continue the conversation. Rating the podcast on whatever platform you listen on will help people find it, so please do that. We'll be back here in something like 2 weeks, and we hope you'll join us. So until then, see you.